Hello, friends. David Vos here. Oh man, it's a beautiful day. Out here on this little lake and enjoying the sunshine. Want to get back into the second in the series. Friends, I apologize. Yesterday, I did not upload the whole video that I had prepared. And it was a long night. I had a lot to do and I was tired. And so when I loaded it, you know, this darn camera, it'll shut off sometimes and I have to start over. And so there was a little section that I didn't get loaded and I didn't realize it wasn't in there. So the video was short. I know somebody was asking how I did such a short video because I don't ever do a video under an hour. And so we'll go over some of that stuff again today. One of the things that you didn't hear yesterday, and we're going to start from there. We talked about, yesterday we talked about Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, that says, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And then we read verse 2, which says, and the earth became empty and waste, or void, empty and void. I don't want to go over a bunch of stuff that we already went over, but I just want to, for those who may not have seen that video, this is what we're talking about. Eschatology. What's going to happen? Is it possible that the entire world could be destroyed? Has it ever been destroyed before? Because Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 says the earth was, in the Hebrew that's actually became, and the earth became without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And then God said, let there be light. Well, we read Jeremiah 23. Let me do that real quick because it's important we start there today. Jeremiah 4:23, because something here is going on that we need to understand. It says, I behold the earth, and indeed it was without form and void, and the heavens, they had no light. Sounds a little bit like Genesis chapter 1, doesn't it? I beheld the mountains, and they indeed trembled, and all the hills moved back and forth. I beheld, indeed, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens had fled. I beheld, and indeed, the fruitful land was a wilderness, and the cities were all broken down at the presence of the Lord Yahweh by his fierce anger. Well, there's no question that this was intended to refer back to Genesis 1 when it says, using the same words, the earth was without form and void. And therefore, it's telling us that something happened between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. God created the heavens and the earth, and then they didn't just, you know, after you created them, they're not going to be void, but the voidness, the emptiness, is a destruction that comes from the fierce anger of the Lord Yahweh. And we're going to find out who Yahweh is, you know, as we've done in many other videos, something you probably, most nominal Christians have no idea who this God really is. And there was a time when the hills trembled and all the birds fled. So there was birds and mountains and people on the earth before Genesis chapter 1 verse 2. But something we didn't read yesterday, and I want to read today. Isaiah chapter 24. Verse 1. Behold, the Lord makes the earth empty and makes it waste. He makes it empty and makes it waste. He distorts the surface and scatters abroad its inhabitants. And it shall be, not in the past, but it shall be, as with the people, so with the priests, as with the servants, so with the master. The earth mourns and fades away. Verse 4. The world languishes and fades away. The haughty people of the earth languish. The earth is defiled under its inhabitants, because they have transgressed the law of Yahweh. He's a God of vengeance, friends. They've changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Remember, we said in another video that God's law is eternal. whether it is Yahweh's law or our Father in heaven, who gives us the law of love and the new covenant with Christ. That's an eternal covenant. But the law of Moses was an everlasting covenant as well. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. And we talked about how Peter talks about the heavens and the earth that are now reserved for fire. They're going to be burned. The heavens are going to be rolled up like a scroll. This is a time in the future. And we got to figure out what it really is. From the ends of the earth, verse 16, we have heard songs. Glory to the righteous, but I said, I am ruined, woe to me. The treacherous elders have dealt treacherously. Indeed, the treacherous dealers have dealt very treacherously. The fear and the pit and the snare are upon you, O inhabitants of the earth. And it shall be that he whoever flees from the noise of the fear shall fall into the pit. He who comes up from the midst of the pit shall be caught in the snare, for the windows from on high are open. The foundations of the earth are shaken. The earth is violently broken. The earth is split open. The earth is shaken exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall totter like a hut. Its transgression shall be heavy upon it, and it will without fail not rise again. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord will punish on high the host of the exalted ones, and on the earth the kings of the earth, and they will be gathered together as prisoners in a pit, and they will be shut up in a prison, and after many days they will be punished. That's all in the book of Revelation, the dragon, the false prophet, and the beast are thrown in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. At the end of the 1,000 years, they're let loose for a little season, for the day of judgment, shut up in a prison. Peter talks about the angels that sinned, that were reserved for judgment, in chains of dense darkness. And it says the moon will be disgraced and the sun is shamed, for the Lord of hosts will reign. The Lord of armies, Yahweh, the God of vengeance, he will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before his elders gloriously. So this is what we want to figure out. What is this talking about? Because it's starting to raise a few red flags, isn't it? Because we had, we've been talking about grace, and there's no more condemnation in those who walk after Christ. And yet we're still dealing with this God of wrath. And so we've got to understand why. Well, let's start with the book of Revelation. The Bible talks about this great millennium where at the beginning all the wicked is slain at the end of the Great Tribulation. It says in Revelation chapter 19, and out of his mouth goeth the sharp sword, and with it he should smite the nations. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather yourselves together to the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of the kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of the mighty men, the flesh of the horses, and of them that sit upon them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he delivered them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that had worshipped his image. These both were cast alive in the lake of burning of brimstone. And the remnant were slain with a sword. Those remaining, were slain with a sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. Wow. Well, first of all, there's quite a bit of scriptures that we need to go through to get all this straight. But those who worshipped his image is every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth, according to the book of Revelation. And only the 144,000 come off victorious from the beast and his image. And, of course, it says in Revelation chapter 20, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years and cast him into the bottomless pit, the abyss. He shut him up, set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. After that, should be let loose for a little season. But of course, as we've already found, during that time, the 144,000 then are the only ones. They're the saints. There's only 12,000 out of each tribe of Israel. All the world. There's 12 tribes. It's all the world. And the chosen that survive, that do not take the mark of the beast, is only 144,000 people. But you see the great multitude up in heaven around his throne. They went through the great tribulation, and they were martyred. Perhaps, we don't know exactly what they all did and stuff, but we know that they're in heaven. They're not on earth. Where then are these 144,000 going to be during the tribulation? Well, during the great millennium. Well, it says, and I saw thrones. This is at an angel coming down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a chain in his hand, and he bound the dragon. And he says, in verse 4, so it's the beginning of the millennium, I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image. That's 144,000. They got the victory. And they had not received a mark upon their forehead or upon their hand, and they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is anyone who has part in the first resurrection. Over him the second death hath no more power. They shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him for 1,000 years. When the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released out of his prison. And then Gog and Magog will go and gather them to the great battle. So even at the end of the 1,000 years, there's another battle. And Gog and Magog is still on the earth. So two things are on the earth during the 1,000 years. All the great multitude of mankind have died. There's a great conflagration and destruction. Because the Apostle Paul says they love not the truth that they might be saved. They would not receive the love of the truth they might be saved. So he sends them a strong delusion. And there's this great beast, and they all take the mark of the beast. Only the 144,000 don't do that. So they're going to be standing on Mount Zion, the beginning of the millennium. That's on earth. Looked in verse chapter 14 of Revelation. I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion. That's not in heaven. That's the kingdom of God on earth. And with him 144,000 having his Father's name written on their foreheads. Not the mark of the beast. You don't write the law on our head and on our forehead. The law of carnal commandments. But we're sealed in the foreheads with his Holy Spirit, which is love. And I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters and the voice of a loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing on their harps. They sing a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures. And the elders said, and no one could learn the song except the 144,000. These are the ones who are virgins, the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed among men, the first fruits to God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit. They are without fault before the throne of God. And I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation and tribe and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment is come. Worship him who made heaven and earth and the sea and the springs of water. Babylon has fallen, Babylon has fallen. Another angel followed, saying, she has made the nations drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And down to verse 10, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they shall have no rest day and night who shall worship the beast in his image, who receives the mark of the name of his name. Here is the patience of the saints and those who are keeping the commandments of God in the faith of Jesus. God's commandment is love one another. And I heard a voice out of heaven saying, right, blessed are they who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they may rest from their labors, and their works will follow them. I looked at a white cloud, and the one sat on it was like the Son of Man, having a golden crown. His hand had a sharp sickle. And another one came out and crying, says, with a loud voice, to him who sat on the cloud, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So, do you see the dilemma that we have here? First of all, Jesus comes, and there's going to be a time where certain ones are going to be tortured day and night in the presence of the Lamb and in the presence of the holy angels. What does this mean? Okay, this is when Christ returns. The tribulation is about to hit, because he says the harvest of the earth is ripe. This is before the millennial. And there's all the wicked, and he captures the beast and the false prophet, and he throws them in the lake of fire that burns with brimstone. Now, you might, Christians then, because they don't understand all the symbology, they will say, well, then, they're taken somewhere to hell. That's otherworldly. It's not on the earth. They're thrown into hell. Where's hell? Well, hell is under the earth, right? Somewhere. Or on the other side of the, whatever. We don't know. It's some spiritual place, right? But let's look at Isaiah 34. Because we're going to find that hell is not what you think. Isaiah 34 says, come up close, you nations, and hear, you national groups. Pay attention. Let the earth and that which fills it listen, the productive land and all its produce. For Jehovah, Yahweh, has an indignation against all the nations. Indignation. He's angry. That's what he does. And his rage against all the army. He must devote them to destruction. He must give them to the slaughter. And their slain ones will be thrown out. As for the carcasses, their stink will ascend. And the mountains will melt because of their blood. There's that melting, right? The melt with fervent heat, the Apostle Peter says. And verse 4, and all those of the army of the heavens must rot away, and the heavens must be rolled up just like a book scroll, and their army will all shrivel away as the leafage shrivels off the vine, and like the shriveled fig off the fig tree. Here's that heavens rolling up or passing by. Another age is arriving, the harvest of the end of the age. For in the heavens my sword will certainly be drenched. Look upon Edom, it will descend. Remember, we talked about what Edom represents symbolically. Edom, well, we'll find out a little bit more about this in Malachi here in a minute. But we've already talked about how the Apostle Paul says that the Israel that is now is Ishmael, Hagar's son. She's in bondage with her children. This is the carnal 12 tribes. Ishmael had 12 children. And that's just Israel in another type or a shadow. And so the Apostle Paul says that he calls them Israel. Because remember, Israel's everybody. But there's two parts. There's the flesh and the spirit. We all have both. And so some of these children play roles. And Edom was the one that God said he hated, but he loved Jacob. Now, God doesn't love one person and hate another person. He doesn't have favorites with his children. This is a symbol of the fact that the flesh is at enmity with God. And the fleshly carnal nature came to be under the law because of its stubborn, stony heart. It's the ego and the God. It's always the two things. There's the God of this world and our Father in heaven, who is above. And your God from beneath. And so there is the two worlds, the two gods, the two covenants, the old covenant and the new covenant. And so Israel, that is now on the earth, trying to build that temple, keeping all these laws and all these rituals, that's the carnal nature. So the Jerusalem that is now is actually Hagar and Ishmael, her son, with those 12 tribes. And as we said, Ishmael married Esau. They became one nation. They both worshipped at Mount Seir. And one of their cities and towns was a town called Bozrah. So the Bible condemns Edom throughout. And when he does so, he's talking about this carnal nature. And that's what it's talking about here in Isaiah chapter 34. Verse 5, as we said, "For in the heavens my sword will certainly be drenched. Look, upon Edom it will descend," upon the carnal world. The physical. "And they'll be devoted to destruction in justice. Jehovah has a sword. It must be filled with blood. It must be made greasy with the fat, with the blood of young rams and he-goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For Jehovah has a sacrifice in Bozrah." That's down a city in Edom, or in Arabia. As the Apostle Paul says, is that Ishmael or Hagar corresponds to a mountain in Arabia. And the Jerusalem that is now corresponds to that. Is not the real Jerusalem. You see, Jesus came and says, not one stone will be left upon a stone. We're going to clarify that very clear here in a minute when we get to the book of Malachi. So the sacrifice in Bozrah is not the one where it's not the Passover. That was the lamb. That was Jesus. He died as an innocent lamb. Didn't deserve it. He took upon his own self all the sins of the world. But there are other sacrifices that are representing something. And the great Day of Atonement, the great goat of Azazel, all the sins of the world will be transferred over to his head because he deserves it, and he'll be thrown into the wilderness. And this is the great sacrifice that he's going to have in the carnal, the physical. Because all the blame isn't on your spirit, your spiritual self, who you really are. It's this flesh. It's going to take all the blame. And we're going to be purged by going through the fire, by going through this time of trouble. And we're going to get rid of the carnal nature. And we're going to be born again. And so it says, "And the wild bulls must come down with them in the land of Edom, and the young bulls with the powerful ones. And their land must be drenched with blood, and their very dust will be made greasy with fat. For it's the day of vengeance, a year of retribution, for the legal case over Zion. For her torrents must be changed into pitch, her dust into sulfur, and her land must become as burning pitch. By night or by day it will not be extinguished. To time indefinite its smoke will keep ascending. From generation to generation she will be parched forever and ever. No one will be passing across her. The pelican and the porcupine must take possession of her. The long-eared owls and the ravens themselves will reside in her, and he must stretch out over her the measuring line of emptiness and the stones of wasteness." The empty and waste, remember that? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it was empty and waste. Now he's going to give the empty and waste again. A great destruction. And here we're finding out this is what this hell is. The indefinite smoke will keep ascending, and the flame will not be extinguished to time indefinite. And its torrents will be changed into pitch, and this dust into sulfur, and her land must become a burning forever and ever. This is the hell. And it's going to come upon the wicked. And what is that? God loves everyone. We're going to explain. So the line of emptiness and wasteness. Empty and waste. Without form and void. All over again. On her dwelling towers, thorns must come up, and nettles and the thorny weeds in the fortified places, and she must become an abiding place of jackals. Azazel is going to be into that wilderness, wandering around. And the courtyard for the ostriches. See, this hell is going to be a broken down place. And the courtyard's going to be for these ostriches and jackals. And the hunters of waterless regions must meet up with the howling animals. Even the goat-shaped demon, now that's Azazel, will call to his companion. Yes, there the night jar will certainly take its ease and find for herself a resting place. Yeah, they're going to find resting in hell. Those who are filthy shall be filthy still. And there the arrow snake has made its nest and lays its eggs, and it must hatch them together under its shadow. Yes, there the gleeds must collect themselves together, each one with her mate. Search for yourselves in the book of Jehovah and read out loud. Not one has been missing of them. They actually do not fail to have their own mate. For it is in the mouth of Jehovah that he has given the commandment, and it is in the spirit that he has collected them together. He has cast over them the lot, and his own hand has apportioned them this place. This is hell. And the measuring line, to time indefinite. For generation after generation they will reside in it. This is hell. But here, we're still left with the question, if hell's going to be on earth, and of course this is the destruction of this carnal system where they're going to try to rebuild the temple and go back to these carnal laws, then what about the next verse, Isaiah 35? The wilderness and the waterless region will exult, and the desert plain will be joyful and blossom as the saffron. Without fail it will blossom, and it will really be joyful with joyousness. Well, where is this? Because the other place was down there in Israel, as we're going to find even more clear here in Malachi, I keep saying. But the wilderness is where the woman goes for a time, times and a half a time. She leaves. She's the diaspora, the children of Israel that are lost, the true Israel. And there shall be the children of the Most High, the living God. He's going to scatter them throughout all the world. And where it is said, you're not my children, you're lost, and you're not, it's, all of us, there's where it shall be said, you're the children of the living God. There will those, so out in the wilderness, around the world, here in America, in Africa, in China, and all around the world, where God's people have gone, where they have been wandering in their wilderness, it will begin to be restored and blossom as the saffron and as the rose, and joyful with joyousness. He will say, strengthen the weak hands, you people, and make the knees that are wobbling firm. Say to those who are anxious at heart, be strong, do not be afraid. Look, your own God will come with vengeance itself, and he will have a repayment, and he himself will come to save his people. Now, at that time, verse 5, the eyes of the blinds will be open, and the very ears of the deaf ones will be unstopped. And the lame ones will climb up like the stag, and the tongue of the speechless one will cry with gladness. For in the wilderness, waters will have burst out, and their torrents will be water, clean, pure water in the desert plain. The heat-parched ground that used to be heat-parched in desert where the woman went in the diaspora, it will have become as a reedy pool and a thirsty ground and a spring of water and an abiding place of jackals, a resting place for them. In that place where there were jackals, there will be green grass with reeds and papyrus plants, and there will be a highway there, even a way, and the way of the holiness it will be called. And the unclean will not pass over it, and it will be for the one walking on it, and no foolish one will wander about on it. No lion will be there, no carnivorous beast, okay? No rapacious sort of wild beast will come up on it. See, the evil, wicked governments will be done. None will be found there. The repurchased ones shall walk there. Remember the 144,000 who get the victory over the beast and his image. And the very redeemed by Jehovah will return and certainly come up to Zion. Where is Zion? With a joyful cry. Remember they're going to, in the Revelation, playing on their harps, they sing the song of the Lamb. They will have rejoicing, and grief and sighing must flee away. Now, I wanted to read to you Malachi. This will put things together that you probably never thought you could put together. But Malachi says this: the word of Jehovah concerning Israel by means of Malachi. I have loved you people, Jehovah has said. You have said, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau the brother of Jacob? Is the utterance of Jehovah? But I loved Jacob, and Esau I have hated. And I have finally made his mountains a desolate waste, and his inheritance for the jackals. Remember, we just got through reading about the sacrifice in Bozrah, in Edom. Because Edom keeps saying, we have been shattered and we shall return and build up the devastated places. We're going to go back and rebuild the temple. The Israel that is now. The carnal nature. They for their part will build, but I for my part will tear it down. And people will certainly call them the territory of wickedness. And the people whom Jehovah has denounced to time indefinite. Where is that time indefinite? Their torrents shall be turned into pitch. And your own eyes will see it, and you yourselves will say, may Jehovah be magnified over the territory of Israel. As a son, for his part, honors a father, and a servant his grand master. So if I am a father, where is the honor for me? If I am a grand master, where is my fear? Jehovah of the armies in the heavens has said to you, O priests who are despising my name, you have said, in what way have we despised your name? By presenting upon my altar polluted bread. 3, look, I am rebuking on your account the seed, and I will scatter dung upon your faces, the dung of your festivals, and I will actually carry you away. And this keeps going on and on. Chapter 3 of Malachi, look, I am sending my messenger, and he must clear up the way before me. And suddenly they will come to the temple, the true Lord, whom you people are seeking, the messenger of the covenant, in whom you are delighting. And he will certainly come, Jehovah of armies has said. But who will be putting up with the day of his coming? And who will be the one standing when he appears? For he will be like a fire of the refiner, and like the lye of the laundryman. Oh boy, here's that hell again. The torrents being turned into pitch. And he must sit as a refiner and cleanser of silver. And he must cleanse the sons of Levi and clarify them like gold and silver. And they will certainly become to Jehovah people presenting a gift offering in righteousness. In verse 5, and I will come near to you people for a judgment, and I will become a speedy witness against the sorcerer and the adulterer. And then verse 8, will earthly man rob God that you have robbed me? And then chapter 4 it says, for look, The day is coming that is burning like a furnace, and all the presumptuous ones and all those doing wickedness must become stubble. Do you see now where this great fire is going to come? This area that's going to have its torrents be turned into pitch. See, it's the day of the Lord coming, and it will not leave them either root nor bough. And to you who are in fear of my name, the Son of Righteousness will certainly shine forth. He's going to send, and he talks about sending them Elijah the prophet for the great and fear-inspiring day of the Lord. The great and fear-inspiring day of the Lord is when he comes to destroy Israel. And Jesus comes, the messenger of the covenant, and he says to Israel, your house is left unto you abandoned, because of the abomination of the desolation. The desolation is coming upon Israel, and they shall lay waste. And the book of Genesis and Exodus tells us that they will have to pay for their sins 7 times, and their land shall lie desolate to pay back its Sabbath. And so for 1,000 years, that area over there in Israel will be turned into pitch and sulfur. But the wilderness area where the woman has gone into all the nations shall blossom as the rose. Okay, so understand what's going on here. Revelation 19 says that Jesus comes with a 2-edged sword out of his mouth, and the flesh of kings and captains and mighty horses, and all of these are going to be murdered and killed and wiped off the face of the earth because they worship the beast in his image. So we know when that is, because it's talking about the time when they worship the beast in his image, coming to the last days that we're in now. Jesus will return, and he will take the false prophet and the beast and send them into the lake of fire. And it says these were both cast into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. Now we read just now that there's going to be a great sacrifice in Basra to this earthly carnal kingdom. They're going to be, their torrents will be turned into pits. So that's why it says that in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb they shall be tormented day and night. Because that land over there is going to be turned into pitch, and the porcupine will dwell there. See, the demons will dwell there. Satan and his devils will dwell there. That will be their land. The Ijiji, or the Gog of Magog. And they'll be on the earth at the end of the 1,000 years, and they'll gather all the wicked back again to another war. But they're going to be on the earth during that time. And then Isaiah 11 says that there's going to be animals on the earth during that time. And the lion and the lamb and the wolf will all lie down together. So they're going to be lying over there in desolation, over there in Israel. Because the Antichrist will come, and the false prophet, that's that period of time when Jesus comes and sends them into the lake of fire. But just before that, they're sitting there rebuilding the temple. They're trying to rebuild the devastated places, as we read in Isaiah chapter 34. But God says, no, I don't want you. I rebuke you. Jesus said, your house is left unto you desolate. So boom, lake of fire. But yet at the same time, during the millennium, the righteous will be okay, because he says he'll judge the righteous and the poor with equity, and the meek of the earth shall be blessed. And the wolf and the lamb shall lie down together. And Revelation 20 says Satan is bound for 1,000 years. Where? In the lake of fire. So he's going to be wandering around like the goat Azazel. The goat Azazel, that's his home. And he's going to have his mate. And the porcupine and the jackal. These are these lower forms and lower carnal nature. The people that are still hanging on to their beliefs and judgments. And they're under the law. Edom. But Revelation 5 says, blessed and holy is anyone that hath part in the first resurrection, because on such the second death hath no more power. They shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. But Revelation 5:10 says they will reign on the earth. It says, and he has made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. So during this time where there's this great generation, their land is turned into pitch, the sulfur, and the porcupine, and the goat Azazel's turned loose over there, and in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, they'll wander around over there. At this very same time, the 144,000 who did not receive the mark of the beast, or the number of his name, they shall reign upon the earth. And in Micah, it says, and he shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more, but they shall every man sit under his own vine and under his own fig tree. And none shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken it. So during the millennium, we're going to have a life living in a paradise, and everybody have their own little property, and we'll have our own fig trees and our own vines. In other words, we can make some wine. Whew, that's going to be good. Fig Newtons too. Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. But it's not until the end of the 1,000 years that Satan is let loose out of his prison. And then he gathers. So, you can imagine that there are that Satan here represents the dragon in the sky. So some of the astral forces, they're going to be stirring up the Ijiji, or some of the Anunnaki who came here and had relations with the daughters of men that have been ruling the world now for thousands of years. They're going to be living up in the hills and the mountains of Bashan, over there in Israel, over in Palestine, like nomads wandering around the desert land. There's not going to be any water over there, and it's going to be a parched land. But at the end of the 1,000 years, and another level, there's another thing, the spiritual part of this, the astral, the principalities, the powers that were in the heavens ruling over the earth. They're going to be rolled up like a scroll, and they're going to pass away. And at the end of the 1,000 years, it says they're going to be let loose out of their prison. They're going to stir up the Ijiji and the Gog of Magog to the great war all over again. But it's confusing, because it's not until the end of the 1,000 years that he says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth has passed away. There's no more sea. So at this point, at the end of the 1,000 years, at the end when the Gog of Magog war is over, then that land over in Israel will finally be redeemed. They'll have paid for all their Sabbaths. It will lie desolate until it pays for its Sabbath 1,000 years. We'll go into the reason why it's 1,000 years in another video. But this is what's going on, friends. So what this is telling us is that the 144,000 are going to be on the earth for near 1,000 years, as well as the nations are going to be destroyed. And all that's going to be left, the earth will be lying desolate. But something else will be on the earth. There'll still be animals. Because it says in Isaiah 11, he will judge the people in righteousness and reprove with equity the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth. Remember, he's going to judge them for 1,000 years. So the 144,000 says, do you not know we'll judge angels? The time of judgment is this 1,000 years. We're going to be on the earth as kings. We'll reign as kings and priests upon the earth, according to the book of Revelation. And here it says, with the breath of his lips, he shall slay the wicked. The wolf will dwell with the lamb. And the leopard shall lie down, and the kid, and the calf, and the young lion, and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the suckling shall play on the hole of the asp. And the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord. Okay, so after this great tribulation that the great multitude comes out of, and they're in heaven now, they've all died. There's a great mountain, the mountain Zion, and 144,000 that go to the mountain, and they meet Christ at the top of the mountain. And they're not defiled with this mark of the beast. They're the ones who get the victory. But during this time, all the wicked are destroyed, and it talks about some terrible things that's going to be going down. They won't even bury their bodies, the Bible says. But what's this thing about the wolf and the lamb, the leopard and the kid? Now, see, the leopard is Greece. That's that beast in the book of Daniel, in the book of Revelation. Remember, it was carnivorous. Now they're not going to eat each other. The governments of the earth are not going to be vicious, but they're going to not hurt or destroy in all his holy mountain. The cow and the bear. Well, the bear is talked about in Daniel. Get up. He was on one side, and eat thou much flesh. It's a carnivore. And you see the lion here, and the leopard, and the kid, Aries. These are governments that are in the sky, in the astrological sky. And they're also governments that Daniel interpreted to mean governments from Babylon on down. This is the great beast, conglomerate beast that rules the world. During that time, the earth is going to come to rest, and it's going to pay back its Sabbaths and lie desolate. There will be people on the earth. There'll be a new covenant made with the animals, according to Ezekiel chapter 34. None of the animals will be harmed anymore. There will be no more death. Well, nobody will die by our hands. So, what we've got to do is understand then all of this scenario and put this together, because we want to understand what this bottomless pit is, this void and this deep. Because remember, it all goes back to Genesis chapter 1, as we said. So there's a little confusion here. You've got different views in Christianity. You got premillennialists and postmillennialists and people who believe that during the 1,000 years mankind will be on the earth. Others believe we'll be in heaven. We got Seventh-day Adventists that say that during the 1,000 years we'll all be in heaven. Then we'll come back down at the end of the 1,000 years. But you see, what's happening is none of these interpreters of Scripture ever understand. First of all, they don't understand what this abyss or bottomless pit is. That's something we're going to find out today. Second of all, they don't understand that the 144,000, they don't know what they are. Those are 12,000 of each tribe, and those tribes are all the world. So these are the fathers. And the sons shall have their hearts turned back unto their fathers. So the fathers are going to be the great king priests that shall rule upon the mountain of God that will be set up at the beginning of the millennium. And they're the ones that get victory over the beast and his image. Nobody else does. So what does Abzu mean? Or Apsu? In the cuneiform, it's Zu-Ab. Sumerian is Abzu. The Akkadian is Apsu. And it's sometimes they call it Inger in the cuneiform. The Akkadian sometimes calls it an Ingaru. And that would mean water or deep or deep water. They say it's the name for fresh water from the underground aquifers under the ground, not the oceanic salt water. I'm not so certain that that's what it really means. We'll find out today. But there was a city that was built on the Abzu, and they called it Eridu. Eridu is the place, as we've seen in other videos that we've done, it's really what the Bible calls Eden, because Eridu was one of the ways that some of the cities would call this town. Others called it Eden. But Edu is Eden. Ur is of Ur, or in the light. So it was the area of Ur, or Eridu. Edu is Eden. And so Eden is the place of the beginning. That is where, according to the Sumerians, Ea Enki ruled. He lived in the Abzu. And this is before the human beings were created, with his wife Damganua and his mother Namu. And he had a gatekeeper called Lamu. Now that's interesting, because a lot of people think that Lamu is Mars. So this is something we've got to get straight. Obviously Mars would be the gate to the heavens. You're going from the earth. Well, the Abzu is depicted as this god in the Babylonian creation epic. The Enuma Elish, we've talked about that. That's about that's the time from the library of Ashurbanipal around 600 BC. And so they talk about, well, in the Enuma Elish it says this: when above the heavens did not exist yet, nor the earth below, Absu, the freshwater ocean, was there. The first, the begetter, and Tiamat, the saltwater. She who bore them all. They were still mixing their waters, and no pasture land had yet been formed, nor even a reed marsh. And then after that, they these two, Absu and Tiamat, create the rest of the gods. So we're talking about a long, long time ago. Now, how does Ea Enki end up ruling over the Absu? Well, he kills his father later on. First, they create some other. First, the Tiamat creates the giants and so forth, the gods, the Anunnaki or whatever, and then they get tired. The Igigi, which we talked about, I think before, Igi is the word Gog, and they're the ones that came to the earth and had relations with the daughters of men. They lived on Mars. They had a way station there on the gate to heaven. The gate going to the deepest waters, which we're going to find out is the great waters of the heavens, that all of the animals go around in a great circle, the gods. And then the Tiamat is the ocean around the earth. The waters above is the great heavens, or the great Milky Way. And of course, the gateway to Ea Enki, or to his great Eridu, to the great Eden, which is the center of the galaxy, would be Mars. And in order to take their, when the Anunnaki came to the earth, or the Igi, they rebelled against the other Anunnaki. The Igigi, which is in our Bible Gog, or Igog, or Magog, Igog, they are the ones, according to our Bible, that rules on Mount Bashan in the north. This is the great mountain in the north that came down to make a great pact. They said they knew what they were going to do was wrong. They were going to start having relations with the daughters of men, because Yahweh had created these human beings from the dust. He formed them from the dust. But this freshwater ocean is a place called the faraway deep, way at the extremities, around and around and around in the farthest extremities of the heavens, above the other waters, which is the salt water. So Eridu is the earliest city, about 5,400 BC, in the Persian Gulf down there, where, Babylon and all these places, in Ur of the Chaldees and all this up there in Iraq, in the Euphrates Valley, right at the beginning of the Gulf, where the water of the Euphrates empties into the Gulf, where the Euphrates River empties. So this Abzu is talked about in the Sumerian text as the distant water. Ab meaning water and Zu meaning far or distant or deep. The deep isn't just, you think, sometimes we think of that word and we think the ocean is deep. And so therefore it's talking about the great ocean. The ocean is Tiamat. It's deep, yes it is, but not nearly as deep as the great heavens that go out around all of the stars in the great Milky Way. So it was considered a fresh water. Now there's in the Sumerian tablets, there's a hymn to Illil, and it says that Abzu, which no one can understand, its interior is a distant sea, which heaven edge cannot comprehend. In the Sumerian tablets, there's a hymn to Illil, and it reads like this: the Abzu, which no one can understand, its interior is a distant sea, which at heaven's edge cannot comprehend it. In another place there, in the Curse of Agad, it reads, the Abzu, where the fates are determined. They always say with the definite article, the Abzu. Well, that's because it's a state of being, a state of existence. You see, because if you look in the Bible, this is what we started off with, Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, there was the deep and the void, the great deep. And that's just before the light, because there was the great deep and the Spirit of God was moving over the great watery deep. And then he says, let there be light. So light then is the city of light, or Ur, that dwells in the Abzu. So this is talking then about, I don't think any scholar has ever really understood this. Everybody's searching for where is this place? Where is this God? Well, the gods are the astrological signs in the heavens. They rule over in each of the houses. And this Ea, he ruled in the light. The very first day in the void and in the great deep, where everything began before it began. And so when you can already see how this is going to pan out. When you throw somebody into this abyss, what you're doing, you're putting them back into a primordial existence. The Sumerian texts talk about Inanna, and that was Enki's daughter. She says, I shall direct my steps to Enki, to the Abzu, to the Eridu. I myself shall speak coaxingly to him in the Abzu. And she will look up at the Abzu. So it's something that is a lot more interesting than what we've been told. It's not just the underground water. Because there are those who think that the water above is the ocean and the underground water is the water beneath. But that's not true. The water beneath is the ocean. In a sense, people thought it was beneath the earth because sometimes the heavens was considered, the deepest place could be under the earth. And they might consider the waters that are in the sky, they assumed were like the waters beneath, way down deep in the bowels of the earth, where it was pure and clean, where everything was born, because they thought of water like semen, because things grew when you gave them water. So the Abzu represents a state of being before we take on form. It's the void. And the location is someplace beyond the gates of Lamu, or Mars. They had a ceremonial practice in Eridu, which was washing their hands. It was a ceremony at the site of the Abzu. So the Sumerians believed that we all had to go through the primordial water. We had to get baptized. To this day, even Christian churches have their water baptismal font. This all goes back to these ancient teachings from Samaria and Egypt. In front of the great temple at Eridu, they had this great big basin that they called the Abzu. See, it was the pure water. And you had to go down in there. So when the Bible says he's going to throw people into the abyss, it sounds terrible, doesn't it? It sounds like Yahweh's a ruthless, awful, evil God, but he really is just the carnal nature of the universe, the darkness of the universe, because the universe has light and it has darkness. And there is our Father in heaven, and then there is the God of this world. And there is vengeance and there is goodness. And as we found, darkness really is an illusion. Yet so long as we are in our infancy, in our state where we haven't learned and grown, then we create these monsters that we have to overcome. And the process to getting to life, that the whole book of Revelation is about, we're trying to get to the kingdom of God and the city of the grand king and receive all the blessings that that will entail. But yet for some, it doesn't come early. And then the wicked will be turned back into hell. They will be turned back into the abyss. That's the lowest, bottomless pit. There's hell, kind of like a purgatory. There's a place where you go into hell and you come back out. And then there's a place where you're chained in there for a period of time. That's the lowest pit. And what this is talking about, we're going to find out. So, what is the purpose? What did they think the purpose of this was? They had a great big, at Eridu, they had a great big basin full of water. This is where we get the baptismal font. This is where we get, in every temple and every house of God, anywhere in the world, people believe in the great baptism. Jesus himself was baptized to represent the great baptism that we go through. And what is that? The real purpose of all of these symbolisms. Because Ea Enki in the Absu is able to transform water into life, to allow the gods, because they're all dancing in ecstasy, pouring water out of their vases. They could allow the gods to live forever. They wouldn't grow old like the rest. But they had to continually enter into the Abzu and immerse themselves in its water in order to extend their lives. That's why Christians today are doing this rite of baptism and they don't even know what it's talking about. It's about being brought back to the sublime state before we were here in the flesh. Being turned back into the great deep in our primordial existence, to start over again, to become young again. They called it entering into the Abzu, a state of rejuvenation. And then they said an old man becomes young again when they are about to drink from the water of the chariot. What is the chariot? The chariot is the zodiac. And the wheels within the wheels are the orbits. We find this also in the book of Ezekiel. And there in Ezekiel, they are also by a river. And there's also a cleansing. And he touches his lips. It says in Isaiah, he touches his lips from the cherubim or from the seraphim. Because you become clean again. You get another chance. You're reincarnated. So the Abzu is controlled by Ea Enki, Ea, because Inanna goes past Mars towards the outer limits of the galaxy, towards the astrological signs, to get to the primordial abyss that all of this floats around in. And there are 7 planets, and she has to go through these different transitions till she gets all the way back to this place where she almost loses herself and she doesn't know who she is, to be renewed and to be reborn. And she gets there and she takes the document, or the book of May, which is the laws of civilization. Whoever has the book of May rules the world, the carnal, physical world, to bring everything back into form. The laws of Ea Enki, the law of God. Because life and death are in his power. He has and holds the book of May. But for Inanna, the church, we're going to receive the book of May. We're going to go down. Christ will go in and redeem us from hell, from the pit. And as Osiris was reborn on the horizon, we'll all be reborn. This is why Ea Enki was a great, powerful God. He had the ability to do many things. He created man because he could control, by means of his law, and the fact that he had control over the Abzu. This gave him the power of the tablets of destiny. So the combination of these two things would give him the power over everyone. Well, anyway, we could go on and on with this, and we're going to go ahead and do another video tomorrow and start here. But I'm going to go ahead and close there. We've just gone too long. This is becoming a very long video. But there was so much I wanted to get in, and I needed to read all of that for you so that you could see where it all fits into place. You guys have a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow.